Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we take sources you send us, dig into them, and pull out the core insights so you can get up to speed fast.
That's right. And today we're diving into something pretty intense, a legend out of Morocco called Aicha Kandicha. It's got this real sense of, well, unease around it.
Yeah, the sources are interesting too. We've got folklore, obviously, but also these stories people claim are eyewitness accounts, and even one from a guy who tried to prove she didn't exist.
So our mission, you could say, for this deep dive is to explore where this legend might come from, what she's supposed to be like, and why she still inspires this very real fear.
Have you ever come across a story like that? One that just feels heavier than fiction? That's kind of what we're getting into here.
Definitely. So let's start with one of the stories we found. It sets the scene pretty well. It's about a merchant, Yusuf, near Marrakech.
Right. And the sources make a point of saying he was careful, prudent. Specifically, he had this rule: never, ever travel after dark.
Which tells you something straight away, doesn't it?
Yeah.
He understood the risks, or at least the perceived risks of the night. He respected certain boundaries.
Exactly. Not a thrill seeker. But you know how it goes. One evening, work runs late. The market.
Yeah, the demands of the day. And he makes that calculation. Maybe I can just make it home before it gets really dark. He takes the river
You can
road.
picture it right. Twilight, the light fading off the water, the usual sounds of the day dying down.
Replaced by the evening sounds, frogs, crickets maybe. But then, according to the story, it goes quiet, like completely silent.
Ooh, that's always a bad sign in these tales, that sudden absence of sound.
It really is. It creates this tension.
Yeah.
And it's in that silence that he hears it. His name. Whispered.
It's his name. Creepy. He must have thought it was the wind or something at first.
Probably.
Yeah.
He looks around, sees nothing. But hearing your own name whispered when you're alone on a darkening road, it plants that little seed of fear, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And then he sees her.
Then he sees her by the river, sort of in the shadows, but also caught in the last bit of light, dressed in white, long, dark hair, described as, like, gleaming.
So almost beautiful at first glance.
Almost. Ethereal? Maybe. But there's immediately something off. He offers help, thinking she might be stranded. She turns.
Yeah.
And her beauty is described as, well, too perfect, unsettlingly so. Her eyes gleam, but her smile, it doesn't match, doesn't reach her eyes.
Ah, that disconnect. That's a classic warning sign in folklore, isn't it? Something not quite human.
Precisely. And when she speaks his name again, even though the air is still, he feels this intense chill. He knows this isn't just some woman by the river.
Okay, so his instincts are screaming now. What happens next?
This is the moment of true horror in the story. He instinctively steps back, tries to get away, and that's when he sees her legs.
Not feet.
No, hooves. And they're mismatched. One like a goat's, the other like a camel's.
Yeah.
Described as hairy, crooked. Just grotesque.
Oh, goat and camel. That's bizarrely specific.
It is. And apparently he freezes. Just paralyzed by fear or something else. Her eyes lock onto his, and they start to glow red.
Red eyes, wow. And then?
And then, darkness. Nothing more in the story from his perspective. The next morning, people find his cart by the river. Perfectly fine. Goods untouched. Even his donkey is there, unharmed.
That Yusuf.
Yusuf is gone. Vanished without a trace. It's a really disturbing end to the tale.
Okay, so that's a powerful introduction to this figure, Aicha Kandicha. Where does this legend actually come from? Is she ancient?
The sources suggest she's very old. Yeah. Possibly predating, the major cities and mosques we associate with Moroccan history. There are hints of Berber roots, maybe Arab influences too.
And some link her to the jinn.
Right. The idea that she might be a jinn, these supernatural beings from Islamic tradition, often tied to the unseen world, capable of shape-shifting, sometimes associated with water or lonely places. You can see the overlaps, can't you?
Yeah, definitely. But there's another origin story too, isn't there? Something more human.
There is, and it's quite compelling. It paints her as a woman, flesh and blood, back in the 16th century during the Portuguese invasion.
A resistance fighter.
Exactly. This version focuses on terrible trauma. Her family killed, her land taken, her dignity violated by the invading soldiers. It gives her a very understandable, very human motive for revenge.
That makes sense. Profound loss leading to something else.
And according to this narrative, that intense suffering is the catalyst. It suggests she made a pact, maybe with dark entities, maybe demons, maybe the sea itself. The source is very seeking power to fight back.
A pact for vengeance.
Yes, and her vengeance was specific. She'd use her beauty, perhaps enhanced by this pact, to seduce soldiers, lure them near water, rivers, the sea, and drown them.
Over and over.
Over and over and over again. The sources really emphasize that repetition, that cycle of violence born from her own suffering. It makes you think about how trauma can, consume someone.
And eventually that changes her. The need for revenge becomes something else.
That's the idea. Her grief and rage supposedly twisted into this insatiable hunger. She became something more than mortal. Less about targeted revenge, more about a general malevolence, perhaps.
That transformation from human avenger to supernatural entity, that feels like a pattern in a lot of powerful legends.
It is. It allows the figure to embody deeper fears, things beyond simple historical grievances. So moving from who she might be, the sources also talk about how you might know if she's near. Practical advice almost.
Right. The spotter's guide to Aicha Kandicha, if you will. What are the signs?
Okay, so things to watch out for. A sudden quiet like the wind just dies unexpectedly. Hearing your name whispered when no one's there. Seeing a woman standing incredibly still, unnaturally still. Or noticing a beauty that feels wrong, too perfect.
But the absolute confirmation.
The absolute confirmation, the terrifying proof is looking down, checking her legs. If you see those mismatched hooves, well, you know who you're dealing with.
And who does she target, according to the legends? Is it just men, like the soldiers in her origin story?
It varies. Some versions say yes, primarily men, maybe echoing that original trauma. But other traditions are broader. They say she preys on anyone vulnerable, the lost, the weak, maybe even people carrying guilt.
So it adds a kind of moral dimension almost. Or maybe reflects different anxieties in different communities.
Could be both. And there's another interesting layer, a theory that she's drawn to places where trauma has occurred, where violence has happened.
Like attracts like. Her own violent origins draw her to locations with similar energy.
Perhaps. It connects back to her story, doesn't it? And location-wise, it's often water rivers are classic, but also those in-between places, abandoned roads, empty courtyards at night.
Liminal spaces.
Exactly. Places that aren't quite one thing or another, and she's almost always described as silent, moving without sound, and definitely nocturnal. A creature of the night.
Okay, so that's the legend, the characteristics. But then our sources shift, don't they, towards alleged real encounters?
Yes, and this is where it gets particularly fascinating, because it moves from story to testimony. This is what really fuels the fear, I think. The idea that this isn't just folklore, that people have actually experienced something.
And these aren't vague rumors. The sources give specific examples.
They do, like a shepherd near Ouarzazate who claimed he saw a woman in white literally walking on the water.
No water, okay.
Or a fisherman in Essaouira. He said he heard his name called from the sea, looked out, and saw her standing on the waves, smiling at him.
That smile again. Unsettling.
Very. And then there's a particularly disturbing one about a soldier. This is in El Jadida. He apparently saw a woman, followed her out into the desert.
Oh.
Yeah. He was found later, completely alone, just wandering, muttering her name over and over, barefoot. His feet were bleeding.
Wow. Just muttering her name. That's chilling. These stories, they feel so immediate.
They do, and they suggest her influence isn't just physical, near water. Some accounts imply she can get into your head. Dreams, thoughts.
So a psychological element, too. Not just a physical threat, but
Yeah.
something that can invade your mind.
It seems to be part of the fear complex surrounding her, yes. Which leads us to maybe the most compelling modern story in our sources. The skeptic.
Right, Kareem, the filmmaker from Rabat. He set out specifically to debunk the whole thing.
Yes, he approached it very rationally, did interviews, filmed at night in supposed hotspots, visited the sites, even deliberately said her name out loud by a river testing the taboo.
Trying to provoke a reaction, basically.
And initially,
Right.
nothing. Nothing seemed to happen. Or as the source puts it, or so he thought.
Oh, there's always a catch. What happened?
Well, about a week passes, and Kareem starts waking up with these scratches on his chest. Unexplained scratches.
Okay, weird, but maybe explainable.
What?
Stress. Sleepwalking.
He tried to rationalize it, definitely. That's what you'd do, wouldn't you? Look for the logical cause. But then he went back to check the footage he shot.
And he found something.
He found something. There was this one clip, just a static shot set up at midnight near one of the rivers. For a while, it's just darkness, river sounds maybe. Then a flicker, a blur. And then suddenly, sharp and clear in the frame, a woman in white.
Just appeared.
Just appeared. The source stresses this. No sound of footsteps, no sense of her walking into the frame. She's just there. And then, just as suddenly, gone.
Whoa, did he recognize her? Did it look like the descriptions?
The source doesn't explicitly say it matched the exact descriptions, but the implication is overwhelming. A woman in white appearing silently, supernaturally, by a river at midnight. It fit the profile.
What did Kareem do after seeing that?
His reaction tells its own story. He supposedly burned the tapes. Destroyed the evidence, he completely abandoned the documentary project.
He didn't release it or show anyone.
No. And apparently he refuses to talk about Aicha Kandicha ever since. Just a complete silence on the subject.
So the skeptic wasn't so skeptical afterwards. That's quite a turnaround.
It really is.
Yeah.
It leaves you wondering, doesn't it? What did he actually capture? What convinced him to drop everything and just stop?
Okay, so let's try and pull this together as we wrap up this deep dive. We have Aicha Kandicha, with origins that might be ancient, maybe supernatural, maybe tied to the jinn.
Or potentially rooted in very real human history, this 16th century resistance fighter, fueled by trauma and a pact for vengeance.
We have her distinct appearance, the unsettling beauty, the white clothes, and crucially, those mismatched hooves.
Right. And her methods, the luring, the association with water and liminal spaces, the targeting of men or the vulnerable, depending on the version.
Plus, these testimonies, these alleged encounters that feel very real to the people telling them.
And then the story of Kareem, the skeptic, whose attempt to debunk the legend seems to have backfired, leaving him shaken and silent.
It's this blend, isn't it? Folklore, genuine fear, historical echoes, and these personal stories that just refuse to dismiss her as just a legend.
Absolutely. It's a powerful mix that explains why she persists, why the story keeps being told, why the fear remains potent.
So the final thought for you, listening to this, when you consider all these threads, the ancient roots, the historical trauma narrative, the sheer consistency of the fear, the eyewitness accounts, and even what happened to Karim, what do you think keeps Aicha Kandicha alive?
Is it purely fear of the dark, the unknown? Is it a way Moroccan culture processes collective memory, maybe historical pain? Or could it be, as some clearly believe, something more, something that exists in that strange territory where belief meets, well, experience?
Something to think about. Where does folklore end and something else begin?